You've reached Frontiers of Antiquity, a podcast exploring the places where civilizations collided, ideas traveled, and history changed forever. Thank you for listening.
I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you have somehow managed to land like the absolute ultimate work-from-home setup.
Oh, the dream.
Right. I mean, I am talking about a scenario where you are ruling the largest, most powerful corporate empire on the face of the earth.
Okay.
And you are doing it entirely from a spectacular private island in the Mediterranean. You've completely isolated yourself, strictly to avoid your treacherous, scheming coworkers back at the main office.
Which is a very specific kind of dream setup.
It really is.
Yeah.
But there is a massive catch to this.
Yeah.
You are completely, absolutely terrified that those very same coworkers are actively trying to assassinate you.
Yeah, that definitely ruins the vibe.
Exactly. Every time a boat appears on the horizon, your heart just skips a beat.
Mm-hmm.
Every piece of mail you get feels like a potential trap.
It is a terrifying way to live, honestly, because you have this facade of the ultimate luxury, right?
Yeah.
An island paradise that people today pay thousands of dollars just to visit for a weekend. But for the man actually living it in the ancient world, it was underwritten by this suffocating, just constant dread.
The ultimate luxury built on top of the ultimate paranoia.
Precisely.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive.
Yeah.
Because you've essentially just described Emperor Tiberius in AD 26.
I have indeed.
And our mission today is to really peel back the layers of all that sensationalized ancient gossip. We want to uncover the highly orchestrated, deeply paranoid, and honestly, surprisingly, technological advanced reality of his decade-long retreat to the island of Capri.
Which is such a fascinating period.
It really is. And to do this, we are layering ancient texts, so writers like Tacitus and Suetonius, right up against modern archaeological findings and the latest historical consensus.
Because you have to balance those out.
Exactly. We really want to get the true picture of Rome's most notoriously reclusive autocrat. And to understand how he managed to reshape the governance of the entire Roman Empire from basically a sheer cliff face.
Yeah, and when you strip away the togas and the marble, this is a profound, almost timeless case study on the psychological toll of absolute power.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to look at the actual architecture of paranoia, how physical geography itself can be, weaponized for political survival.
Which is wild to think about.
It really is. And we'll see what happens to a human mind when the only way to feel safe is to build an impenetrable wall between yourself and the rest of humanity.
So let's put ourselves in Tiberius's shoes in AD 26. He is 67 years old at this point.
Which is ancient by Roman standards.
Right, by any ancient standard, that is a senior citizen.
Yeah.
And he is just physically and mentally exhausted.
Totally burnt out.
Yeah, I was reading through the context of his early reign, and he didn't even really want this job in the first place.
No, not at all.
He was kind of strong-armed into it by his predecessor, Augustus. And by the time we hit AD 26, his relationship with the Roman aristocracy and the Senate isn't just strained, it's irreparably broken.
It is utterly toxic. To really understand why he felt he had to physically flee, you have to understand the environment Tiberius was operating in back in Rome.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So Augustus, the first emperor, had established a political system that was essentially a brilliant lie.
A lie.
Yes, he maintained the illusion that the Roman Republic still existed, that the Senate still mattered, all while he was holding all the actual military and political power himself.
Ah, right. The whole first among equals thing.
Exactly. Augustus was a master of this theatrical performance. He played the part of the humble first citizen beautifully. But Tiberius, he was a brilliant military general, a very stoic, rigid man.
He was not an actor.
Not even a little bit. He absolutely despised the theatricality of Roman politics. He hated the sycophancy of the senators.
So it basically sounds like he was an introvert forced to host a never-ending cocktail party where half the guests are secretly plotting to murder him.
That is a very, very accurate assessment. And the plotting wasn't just him being paranoid, right? It was a very real threat.
Right.
And it was exacerbated by two massive catalysts that finally just pushed him over the edge into this self-imposed exile.
Okay, so what was the first one?
First, you have the highly suspicious death of his adoptive son and the presumed heir, Germanicus. This happens in AD 19.
Germanicus?
Right. And Germanicus was everything Tiberius wasn't. He was incredibly charismatic, beloved by the people, just a superstar general.
The golden boy.
Precisely. He was stationed in the east, out in Antioch, and suddenly he falls violently ill.
And it wasn't just like a normal fever, right? Because the sources mention some incredibly dark, almost horror movie level details about his death.
Oh, absolutely. As Germanicus was dying, his supporters claimed they found real evidence of black magic and assassination.
Which is terrifying.
They reportedly discovered lead tablets inscribed with his name hidden in the walls of his quarters.
Wow.
Along with smeared blood, half-burned human remains, and other ritualistic curses.
That is so grim.
It was, and Germanicus himself fully believed he was being poisoned by the local governor, a man named Piso. And Piso happened to be a very close friend of Tiberius.
I see where this is going.
Right. So when Germanicus actually dies, his widow, Agrippina the Elder, returns to Rome with his ashes. And she is practically screaming to anyone who will listen that Tiberius ordered the hit to eliminate a rival.
So the whispers in the Capitol just never, ever stopped. Everywhere Tiberius goes, he's looking at senators who probably think he straight up murdered the golden boy of Rome.
Exactly.
And then on top of that grief and the constant suspicion, you had the second major catalyst, the rise of Lucius alias Sejanus.
Sejanus, yes, he was the Praetorian prefect.
The head of the bodyguard, basically.
Exactly. Essentially the head of the emperor's elite personal security. But Sejanus had systematically manipulated his way into becoming the second most powerful man in Rome.
Just a classic ambitious right-hand man.
Highly ambitious, deeply manipulative. And he realized early on that the easiest way to gain power was to feed into Tiberius's existing paranoia.
Oh, that is so devious.
It was brilliant in an evil way. Sejanus positioned himself as the only man Tiberius could truly trust, and he actively, systematically isolated the emperor from any potential allies.
Like, they're all out to get you, boss, but I've got your back.
That was exactly his pitch. He would feed Tiberius reports of treasonous plots. Some were real, but many were entirely fabricated by Sejanus himself.
Wow.
So Rome had entirely ceased to be a functioning capital city for Tiberius. It had become a hunting ground, and he felt like the prey.
So he just decides to get out. He's done. He leaves the capital for the region of Campania in AD 26, and by AD 27, he settles permanently on the island of Capri.
He does.
Now, looking at the geography of this decision, it completely fascinated me. Because this island wasn't just some random spot he picked off a map, right?
No, not at all.
It wasn't even always imperial property. His predecessor, Emperor Augustus, actually fell head over heels in love with Capri way back in 24 BC.
He did.
But to get it, Augustus had to make a massive real estate trade with the city-state of Neapolis, which is modern-day Naples. He traded them the island of Ischia to get Capri.
Which is such a brilliant detail to highlight, because it really shows the fundamental difference in what these two emperors valued.
Yes, so.
Well, if you look at Ischia, it is much larger than Capri. But more importantly, Ischia is volcanic.
Okay, meaning the soil is good.
Exactly. The soil is incredibly rich, fertile, and perfect for agriculture. It is objectively a much more valuable, productive piece of land from an economic and logistical standpoint.
So it's the better island on paper.
By far.
Right.
Capri, by contrast, is much smaller. It isn't volcanic at all. It is essentially a giant, jagged chunk of limestone just jutting out of the Tyrrhenian Sea.
Right.
It has terrible soil for farming, and as we will discuss later, it doesn't even have its own natural water supply.
It's like a modern tech billionaire buying a jagged, barren rock in the middle of the ocean instead of a lush, fertile Hawaiian island just to escape a hostile corporate board takeover.
That's a great way to put it.
Except the boardroom is the Roman Senate, the weapons are literal daggers, and the island is already in the family trust. So why make that trade? Why give up the big, fertile island for a jagged piece of limestone?
Because of the military reality of ancient warfare and defense, what Capri lacked in fertile farmland, it more than made up for in sheer, unadulterated verticality.
The cliffs.
The cliffs. The island is defined by these towering, sheer limestone cliffs that plunge hundreds of feet straight down into the crashing sea. They function as natural, insurmountable walls.
Right, you can't exactly sneak up a sheer cliff.
Exactly. You cannot bride a cliff. You cannot intimidate a cliff. In the ancient world, unannounced arrivals on Capri were quite literally impossible.
Wow.
The sightlines from the peaks allowed lookouts to see a ship coming for miles in any direction. And even if a ship made it to the island, there were only a couple of very specific, easily choke-pointed, tiny harbors where anyone could even attempt to dock.
So it's basically the ultimate gated community, but the gates are made of solid rock.
Yes.
But here's the thing that really struck me about all this. He's not just retiring there to, like, paint watercolors or live out his final days in peace.
Right. Mm-hmm.
He is actively governing the entire Roman Empire from this rock. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of a Roman senator for a second.
Yeah.
For 500 years, your city, your forum, your Senate house has been the absolute center of the universe, and suddenly the boss just moves to a rock and essentially proves you don't matter at all.
And that is the crux of the entire political shift here. What does it actually mean when the autocrat leaves the capital?
Right.
By moving to Capri, Tiberius isn't just taking an extended vacation, he is undertaking a massive structural political shift. He is strategically decoupling the power of the emperor from the physical location of Rome.
Wow. Decoupling the power.
Yes. For centuries, power in the Roman world was geographically bound to the city itself. Tiberius comes along and proves that the empire is wherever the emperor happens to be standing.
Which is a terrifying thought for the Senate.
Exactly. He renders the Senate geographically irrelevant. They are stuck in Rome, performing their ancient rituals, passing meaningless resolutions, while the actual decisions regarding the military, the economy, and the fate of millions are being made on a limestone rock miles out at sea.
It's the ultimate power move. Like, you want to talk to the manager, good luck, he's on a fortress in the sky, and you aren't invited.
Precisely.
So you have this perfect, isolated, jagged island. But you can't just pitch a tent on a cliff and run an empire.
No, you definitely cannot.
How do you take a sheer piece of limestone and turn it into the functional, administrative capital of an empire that spans from Britain to Syria? You have to build.
And build he did, on a scale that honestly defies belief. According to the Roman historian Tacitus, Tiberius built 12 distinct villas across the island of Capri.
12.
12. Each one was likely dedicated to a different Roman deity. But the absolute crown jewel of this imperial complex, the administrative heart of the empire during this period, was Villa Jovis, the Villa of Jupiter.
And the scale of this place is just staggering. I was looking at some of the archaeological surveys, and the ruins of Villa Jovis sit on the peak of Monte Tiberio.
Yes.
That is 334 meters above the sea on the extreme northeastern tip of the island. And it spanned over 7,000 square meters.
It was massive. It had to be built over multiple terraced levels because the terrain was so incredibly steep.
Oh, I bet.
The Roman architects essentially had to carve right into the mountain and build massive retaining walls just to create flat surfaces to build on.
Wow.
And the structural layout of Villa Jovis really reflects the deeply compartmentalized, security-obsessed mind of Tiberius.
How so?
Well, the northern wing was dedicated entirely to his private apartments, and these were designed to be ultra-secure, facing the sheer drop to the sea.
So nobody is sneaking in through the bedroom window.
Exactly. The eastern wing was for ceremonial receptions, the very few times he actually allowed audiences, ambassadors, or couriers into his presence.
Okay.
And the southern wing, well, that was dedicated to the luxurious thermal baths, the thermae.
Okay, hold on. This is where the physical reality of the islands just totally collides with the luxury of Rome. And I really need you to explain the mechanics of this to me.
I can try.
Because if you are building a massive, luxurious Roman bathhouse on a 334-meter-high cliff,
right,
and you have absolutely zero natural freshwater springs on this island, which our sources explicitly state, how on earth are the Roman engineers pulling that off?
It's a huge problem.
Right. Roman baths required thousands and thousands of gallons of water constantly flowing. They had those underfloor heating systems, the hybacos, to keep the hot rooms steaming.
Yes.
Are they just, like, conscripting thousands of enslaved people to carry buckets of water up a 300-meter mountain every single day so the emperor can have a hot soak?
No. That is the exact logistical nightmare the Roman engineers faced, and carrying buckets would have been incredibly inefficient.
And a security risk, probably.
Exactly. A massive security risk. You do not want a constant stream of laborers moving up and down your highly secure mountain all day long.
Good point. So what did they do?
Their solution was an absolute marvel of ancient hydraulic engineering. Beneath this massive 7,000 square meter palace, they literally carved out a labyrinth of colossal subterranean rainwater cisterns right into the limestone bedrock.
Wow.
They basically turned the entire roof structure and the terrace layout of Villa Jovis into a massive, highly calculated funnel.
Okay, so they're catching the rain.
Yeah.
But how do you store that much water without it just seeping into the rock. Because limestone is porous, right?
Very porous. And this is where Roman concrete opus cementitium literally changes the world.
Okay.
The Romans had discovered that by mixing volcanic ash, which is known as pozzolana, with lime and rubble, they could create a concrete that not only cured to incredible hardness, but could actually cure underwater.
Oh, wow.
And it resisted moisture perfectly, so they lined these massive underground caverns with a specialized waterproof mortar called opus signum.
Opus signum.
Right. It was a mixture of crushed terracotta and lime. Every single drop of rain that hit the roofs of the complex was meticulously channeled through lead pipes and terracotta gutters.
So nothing was wasted.
Not a drop. It was passed through settling tanks to filter out debris and sediment, and then stored deep inside the mountain in these perfectly sealed concrete vaults.
So the entire palace is basically just sitting on top of a giant man-made underground lake.
Precisely. These cisterns had to be massive enough to supply the drinking water for the imperial quarters, the water for the kitchens, the daily hygiene needs of hundreds of staff, guards, and enslaved people, and of course, the thousands of gallons required to keep the thermal baths operating year-round. They had separate vaulted chambers, and the water could be drawn up through shafts directly into the villa.
That is just incredible.
What's really fascinating here is the duality of this architecture.
What do you mean?
Well, on the surface, if you are a visiting ambassador, Villa Jovis is a lavish, sun-drenched Mediterranean resort with stunning views, mosaics, and hot baths.
The ultimate luxury.
Right. But beneath the floorboards, it is a highly defensible, self-sustaining bunker built specifically to survive a prolonged military siege.
Oh, so it's a panic room.
Exactly. Tiberius knew that if the Senate or an army ever turned against him, he could lock the doors and survive for months, maybe years, on the water stored beneath his feet.
It really is the ancient equivalent of a James Bond villain lair.
It really is.
He has the luxury above, the survival infrastructure below, and a sheer drop on all sides. But a bunker, no matter how luxurious or well-stocked with water, is completely useless to an emperor if you cannot talk to the outside world.
Very true.
Like if you are locked in a mountaintop fortress trying to manage legions in Germany, tax collectors in Egypt, and the Senate in Rome, how do you actually govern?
You build the ancient equivalent of the internet.
Yes. I would say this is easily the most mind-blowing part of this entire deep dive for me. The optical signaling network.
It is incredible to maintain direct, real-time administrative control over Rome while remaining perfectly isolated on his island. Tiberius and his engineers developed a highly sophisticated communication infrastructure.
Okay.
It relied on a 30-kilometer line-of-sight visual connection directly across the Gulf of Naples.
So, on the Capri side, right next to Villa Jovis, our sources say Tiberius constructed this massive lighthouse, a pharos.
Right.
And it sat right on the edge of that 334-meter cliff, pushing the elevation even higher. By the way, Suetonius mentions a crazy detail about this tower.
Oh.
Yeah, he says it actually collapsed during an earthquake just a few days before Tiberius died in AD 37.
Ah, right. To a highly superstitious Roman world, that must have felt like a massive, terrifying omen.
Definitely. But while it was standing, it was the first node in this network.
And looking across those 30 kilometers of open water, those signals from the pharos were received by a dedicated network of watchtowers known as speculi.
Okay.
These were situated on the high ridges overlooking Cape Misenum on the mainland. And Cape Misenum wasn't just some random spot chosen for its elevation. It was the headquarters of Rome's premier imperial naval fleet, the Classis Misenensis.
Right, so you're not just flashing lights at a random beach.
Yeah.
You're beaming signals straight to the ancient equivalent of the Pentagon. You have the full might of the Roman Navy sitting right there. And then what happens? How does the message actually get to Rome?
Once the specially trained naval lookouts at Misenum received and decoded the signal from the island, the message immediately hit the cursus publicus.
Which is the Imperial Pony Express.
Essentially, yes. The official imperial courier service, which was instituted by Augustus, it was a massive logistical network of roads, relay stations, and fresh horses.
So they just ride it up to the capital.
Right. You have fast horse riders, or in some cases, a secondary chain of relay towers, racing up the coast and then onto the Via Appia.
Wow.
From Misenum to Rome is an overland distance of roughly 240 kilometers. Because they had fresh horses waiting at relay stations every 10 to 15 miles, a high-priority dispatch could travel from the flashing light on Capri, hit the mainland, be put on a horse, and be in the hands of the authorities in Rome in under 24 hours.
I am still trying to wrap my head around the actual physical technology here. I mean, they didn't have telescopes. They obviously couldn't text. How are you transmitting complex imperial orders across 30 kilometers of hazy ocean using literally smoke and mirrors?
The technology was brilliant in its simplicity, but very complex in its execution. Because they lacked advanced lenses to magnify the signal, they relied on high visibility markers managed by specialized lookouts called speculators.
Okay.
During the daytime, they used controlled plumes of smoke. And it wasn't just a single bonfire that you light and leave alone. The operators could manipulate the thickness of the smoke, the color, and the number of columns.
How do you change the color of smoke out there?
They did this by burning different materials. So if they wanted thick white smoke, they would throw damp straw onto the fire. If they wanted thick, dark, black smoke, they would use pitch, tar, or specific types of resinous wood.
That is so clever. But what if it's like a perfectly clear, sunny Mediterranean day where smoke might just dissipate in the wind?
Then they used highly polished bronze or silver mirrors to flash reflected sunlight across the bay. It functioned exactly like a 19th century heliograph. By angling the mirror to catch the sun and directing it at the watchtower on the mainland, they could create brilliant flashes of light that were easily visible across 30 kilometers.
And what about at night?
At night, the medium shifted again. They used large wood or oil-burning braziers. They would block and expose the flames using large mechanical shutters or shields, or they would hoist multiple torches into the air in specific configurations.
Wow.
This nocturnal signaling system was known in the ancient Greek military manuals as Persia.
But surely they aren't like spelling out HELLOSENATE letter by letter.
Yeah, no.
Because that would take forever. The chance of a transmission error would be huge, and more importantly, anyone with a boat in the Bay of Naples could sit there and read the emperor's mail.
Right, and this is where the security aspect becomes absolutely paramount. The optical network was not spelling out sentences letter by letter. It utilized a prearranged, highly encrypted operational codebook.
A code book?
Yes. The signals corresponded to specific high-priority state alerts. A certain pattern of flashes or a specific combination of smoke columns might translate to a macro-level command.
Oh, I see.
For example, 3 flashes followed by a pause and 2 more flashes might mean incoming diplomatic fleet spotted from the south.
Okay.
Another configuration might mean send Imperial Guard reinforcements to the island. Or, most importantly, execute treason contingency.
It really is just macro keys for the Empire. It's a physical shortcut. Press button A to move the Green Fleet. Press button B to execute a senator.
Exactly. And only Tiberius, his most trusted Praetorian officers on the island, and the lead operators at the naval base knew the shifting encryption code.
So no one else could read it.
No one. This prevented tampering, spoofing, or interception by political enemies. You couldn't just light a fire on the beach and trick the Navy into invading Rome.
Right.
The psychological security this provided Tiberius cannot be overstated. He possessed a total information monopoly. He could react to crises in Rome faster than the Senate could even organize a meeting. He completely bypassed their traditional communication channels, effectively rendering their political maneuvering completely obsolete.
It sounds totally foolproof. But a theoretical system, no matter how clever the cryptography is really only as good as its ultimate stress test.
That is true.
And in AD 31, this Roman internet was put to the ultimate life or death test.
Ah, yes. The Sejanus crisis.
Let's set the scene for this because the tension here is just incredible. We mentioned Sejanus earlier.
We did.
By AD 31, this guy, Praetorian prefect, has been running wild in Rome for years while Tiberius is on Capri.
Absolutely unchecked.
Right.
Yeah.
Sejanus essentially controls the physical, day-to-day infrastructure of the capital. He commands the troops, he controls access to the emperor's correspondence, and he has been systematically purging his political rivals through show trials.
He was a terror.
He is clearly positioning himself to usurp the throne. He is ready to make his move, and Tiberius is still sitting on his rock 150 miles away.
Tactically speaking, Sejanus has a massive local advantage. The Praetorian Guard, the only military force legally allowed inside the city of Rome, answered directly to him.
That's a huge problem for Tiberius.
A massive problem. But Tiberius has the network, and he has a brilliant, albeit deeply paranoid strategic mind. In AD 31, Tiberius receives intelligence, likely smuggled past Sejanus's blockade, that the prefect's plot is imminent.
Okay.
Tiberius decides the time has come to eliminate him. But he doesn't march on Rome with an army. He orchestrates the entire downfall, arrest, and execution of the most powerful man in the capital entirely via his optical network and couriers from Capri.
Hold on, this is where the logic of autocracy gets really twisted for me. I have to push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
He's the emperor. He's the entire Roman military at his disposal.
Mm-hmm.
Why is he playing cloak and dagger with a flashlight 150 miles away?
It's a fair question.
If he knows Sejanus is a traitor, why doesn't he just publicly declare him an enemy of the state, send a loyal legion down from Germany, and stamp out the rebellion?
Because that assumes autocratic power is absolute, stable, and unquestioned, and it rarely is.
Really?
The physical distance meant Sejanus had the immediate military advantage. If Tiberius simply sends a public decree or a standard letter saying, "Arrest Sejanus," Sejanus would likely intercept it.
Oh, right.
He would read it to his Praetorian guards and say, "The old man on the island has lost his mind. He has been corrupted by bad advisors. We are taking over for the good of Rome."
And they would listen to him.
The Praetorians, who were paid and commanded by Sejanus, would likely follow him. A civil war would instantly erupt.
So you can't just fire him. It has to be a perfectly timed decapitation strike before Sejanus even realizes he's in danger.
Exactly. The execution of this coup requires incredible precision. Tiberius appoints a new man, Naevius Sutorius Macro, to secretly replace Sejanus.
It's Macro, yeah.
Tiberius gives Macro a letter and sends him to Rome. Now, this letter is a masterpiece of political misdirection. It was known as the Verbosa et Grandis Epistula, the long and wordy letter.
I love that title.
Macro arrives at the Senate, which is meeting in the Temple of Apollo, and he meets Sejanus outside. He quietly tells Sejanus, "Great news, the emperor is finally granting you tribunician power."
Oh, wow.
Basically, Sejanus thinks he's getting the ultimate promotion, making him the official heir.
So Sejanus just struts into the Senate House, completely relaxed, thinking he's about to be crowned king.
Meanwhile, as Sejanus sits down to listen to the letter being read to the Senate, Macro stays outside.
What's he doing?
He approaches the Praetorian guards stationed around the temple. He shows them his new commission from Tiberius, and, crucially, he promises them a massive financial bonus, a donative, if they return to their barracks.
Bribing the guards.
Exactly. He then replaces the Praetorians with the Vigiles, the city's night watch, who are loyal to a different commander.
That is incredibly bold. He's swapping out the troops while the target is literally in the next room.
Yes.
And inside the temple, this letter is being read. I've read descriptions of this letter, and it is just torturous.
It really was.
It starts with mundane administrative business, completely normal. Then it offers some mild criticism of some of Sejanus's allies. Then it goes back to normal business.
Lulling him into a false sense of security.
Right. And then it suddenly pivots to direct, blistering accusations of treason against Sejanus himself, demanding his immediate arrest.
The whiplash must have been intense.
The senators, who had just been sitting next to Sejanus trying to flatter him, physically scramble away from him as the tone of the letter shifts.
It was a brilliantly constructed psychological trap. By the time the letter finished, the guards had been swapped, the Senate had turned on him, and Sejanus was completely isolated.
Game over.
He was arrested, dragged to the Mamertine prison, and strangled that very day. But while this incredibly tense, fragile coup against a coup is happening in Rome, look at where Tiberius is.
Right. The sources say he is standing on the highest cliff edge of Villa Jovis, staring out at the Misenum horizon, waiting for the signal.
He was terrified.
And this is the detail that just blew my mind. He has a backup plan. He literally has a fleet of fast ships, fully prepped, manned, and idling at the base of the cliffs. If the watchtowers flash the signal that Sejanus has won, that the coup has failed, Tiberius is ready to sprint down the mountain, board a ship, and flee to the loyal legions in the eastern provinces to start a civil war.
This is the ultimate snapshot of the paranoid survivor. He's the most powerful man in the world, yet he is standing on a rock with a getaway car running.
Exactly.
Fleeing to the legions was a calculated risk management strategy. It shows that despite his title, the optical network wasn't just a convenience for managing taxes, it was a literal lifeline.
Wow.
He was brilliant, he was pragmatic, and he was absolutely terrified that his own plan would fail.
But the system works. The lookouts on Capri see the signal fire from the mainland. The code translates to, Sejanus is dead, Rome is secure.
A huge relief.
The system successfully relays the news, and Tiberius retains total, absolute control of the Roman Empire without ever having to pack a bag, face his enemies, or leave his island.
He survived the crisis. The network proved its worth.
It did.
But I think it is vital to ask, What does it do to a person to live like that? To trust a flashing light more than any human being?
Right?
After you remotely execute your top commander, the man you trusted most, and you realize that absolutely anyone could be a traitor. How do you even sleep at night, let alone eat breakfast or run an empire?
Which is the perfect pivot to looking at his day-to-day reality. What was life actually like on this island?
It wasn't exactly a party.
Because you might think, hey, I survived a coup, the enemy is dead, it's time to relax by the pool and enjoy the fact that I own Capri.
Right.
But no. The sources describe him as an absolute miserable workaholic.
Yes, his mornings were strictly dedicated to administration. The geographic isolation of Capri allowed him to filter out all the tedious ceremonial pageantry of Roman public life that he despised.
So no more pretending to like the senators.
None of it. No glad-handing senators who secretly wanted him dead, no attending public games, no listening to endless, flattering speeches in the forum. He just focused entirely on the paperwork.
I picture the dispatches arriving at the naval base at Misenum, getting shuttled across the bay on fast courier boats, and being carried up those steep paths to the villa by elite guards.
Exactly.
And he just sat there in his secure northern wing, reviewing tax rates for Gaul, signing off on military appointments in Syria or Britain, issuing complex judicial rulings completely via written correspondence.
He essentially reduced the management of a sprawling multi-continental empire to an inbox and an outbox.
That's wild.
He compartmentalized the world, and when the morning paperwork was done, he would take his solitary walks.
Okay.
Our sources note he suffered from chronic severe skin conditions, likely painful rashes or ulcers, which modern medical historians suggest were heavily exacerbated by immense chronic anxiety.
I'm not surprised given the stress he was under.
Right. He found relief in walking the terraced gardens and the cliffside paths. But even the simple act of walking in a garden was a massive security operation.
Let me guess. Guards everywhere.
He was surrounded by a heavily armed perimeter of Praetorian guards. No one was allowed to approach him uninvited.
And what about human connection? I mean, we know senators were strictly banned from the island.
Absolutely banned.
If a senator showed up on Capri without an explicit invitation, it was essentially a death sentence.
It really was. He handpicked a very small, incredibly exclusive entourage known as the cohors amicorum.
The cohort of friends.
Right. It was a micro-society consisting of maybe a dozen individuals, a few top-tier legal scholars to help with the administration, and some high-ranking Greek grammarians and philosophers.
Well, no politicians.
Exactly. These were not political threats. They were intellectual companions.
And the dinners. The symposia. I was reading about his social events, and this is where the psychology gets so bizarre.
Oh, the dinners are fascinating.
Yeah, picture Roman imperial banquets as these wild, chaotic parties with endless wine and debauchery. But Tiberius's dinners were just intensely pedantic and incredibly stressful.
Very much so.
He would host these evening banquets and challenge his guests with highly specific, absurdly obscure trivia about classical mythology.
Suetonius tells us he would read ancient Greek texts during the day, find some tiny, irrelevant detail, and then just spring it on his guests at dinner.
Like what?
He would ask things like, what song did the sirens sing to Odysseus? Or what specific name did Achilles take when he disguised himself and hid among the women at the court of Lycomedes?
It's like a twisted, high-stakes version of a hostile workplace. You're at a dinner party, the boss, who literally just executed his best friend, by the way, asks you a Jeopardy question about ancient mythology.
Yes.
And if you get it wrong, or if you hesitate, or if you accidentally offend him with your answer by sounding too smart, you don't just lose the game, you lose your career.
Or your life.
You could be banished from court or worse.
Because it wasn't really about the trivia, was it?
Yep.
It was a test of intellectual submission. It was a way to dominate the smartest men in the empire by forcing them to play his incredibly high-stakes games on his turf.
Oh, wow.
He created a micro-society that was a pure projection of his own rigid, controlling, and anxious mind. And this is where we have to understand the concept of maestas.
Right, treason. But it wasn't just treason in the way we think of it today, like plotting an armed rebellion.
Exactly. Maestas is short for Maestas Minuta Populi Romani, diminishing the majesty of the Roman people, and by extension, the emperor who represented them.
Okay.
Under Tiberius, maestas became completely weaponized. It wasn't just about armed revolt anymore.
What else was it?
Well, if you took a coin bearing the emperor's image into a brothel, that could be maestas.
Just having a coin in the wrong place.
Yes. If you changed your clothes near a statue of Augustus, that could be maestas. If you gave the wrong answer at a dinner party and it made the emperor look foolish, that could be framed as maesta.
That's terrifying.
The paranoia seeped into every single human interaction.
And if it was that stressful for his inner circle of friends, it was an absolute waking nightmare for the locals.
The native inhabitants, yes.
We really have to talk about the native inhabitants of Capri, because the island wasn't empty when he bought it.
No, not at all.
There were Greek and Italian farmers and fishermen who had lived and worked on this island for generations. And suddenly, the most paranoid man on Earth moves into the neighborhood, and their home is placed under permanent military occupation.
A total maritime lockdown. To guarantee his absolute security, the waters around the island were constantly patrolled by the Misenum fleet. It was a restricted military zone.
I can't imagine trying to make a living there.
Local fishermen faced severe punishments, even death, if their boats drifted too close to the restricted cliffs or the private coves below the villas. They were just trying to make a living on the sea, but one wrong current could send them into a kill zone.
There is this one story from Suetonius that just perfectly encapsulates the sheer terror of interacting with Tiberius.
Oh, the fisherman story.
Yes, the mullet story. There is this local fisherman. He is out on his boat, and he catches an enormous, beautiful mullet, a prize fish.
Okay.
And he thinks, I'm going to bring this to the emperor as a gift. Maybe he'll reward me, maybe he'll pay me handsomely.
A very normal human thought.
Right. But he can't go to the front door because the guards will stop him. So this poor guy scales a steep, unguarded cliffside path on the backside of the island.
Which is an impressive feat.
He essentially free climbs his way up the jagged rocks to the villa to present this fish to Tiberius, who is out for a walk.
Think about the two entirely different realities colliding here. The fisherman thinks he is showing respect and offering a wonderful gift. He expects a reward.
Right.
But look at it through the lens of a man who just survived the Sejanus plot. Tiberius sees a catastrophic security breach.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
If a simple, uneducated fisherman encumbered with a giant mullet can scale that cliff completely unobserved by the Praetorian Guard and get within arm's reach of the emperor.
Then an assassin with a dagger could do the exact same thing.
Precisely.
He literally proves that the impenetrable fortress isn't actually impenetrable.
Yes.
So Tiberius completely panics. He is so terrified by the breach that instead of rewarding the guy, he immediately orders his guards to grab the fisherman and literally rub his face raw with the fish.
It's awful.
The scales of the mullet are just shredding the poor guy's face as punishment for startling the emperor.
It draws a very sharp, very brutal contrast, doesn't it?
It really does.
You have the idyllic, breathtaking, natural beauty of the island of Capri on one hand, and the deeply stressful, oppressive, violent reality of living under an absolute autocrat on the other.
Yeah.
The mundane act of giving a gift is instantly transformed into a terrifying act of violence.
Like, God forbid you bring him a present.
Right.
But that sheer terror wasn't just reserved for poor fishermen trying to be nice.
Yeah.
Inside the palace, among the elite, the paranoia was reaching a boiling point where human intelligence just wasn't enough to make him feel safe.
No, it wasn't.
When you can't trust your guards and you can't trust your friends, who do you turn to?
You turn to the supernatural.
The astrologers.
Because Tiberius was terrified of betrayal, the palace was thick with spies and informants. Every casual remark was monitored. But when that isn't enough to quell your paranoia, you look for answers that human beings can't manipulate.
The stars.
Right. Tiberius relied heavily on state-sanctioned astrology to make major political decisions.
Now, when we say astrology, we aren't talking about, like, reading your horoscope in a magazine, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the ancient world, this was considered a highly complex mathematical science.
Absolutely. The Romans viewed astrology as the mechanics of fate. If you could read the stars correctly, you could literally read the code of the universe.
Okay.
And Tiberius was a true believer. This wasn't a hobby. It was his primary intelligence-gathering apparatus for predicting the future.
Which brings us to a man named Thrasyllus of Mendes.
Thrasyllus, yes.
Who was he?
Thrasyllus was a brilliant Greek philosopher, mathematician, and astrologer. He had been with Tiberius since his earlier exile in Rhodes, way before he was emperor.
Oh, they went way back.
Right, and he became Tiberius's closest, most trusted companion on the island. But his initial job interview for that position was absolutely terrifying.
The astrologer's cliff.
Yeah.
Tacitus records this, and it is just chilling.
It really is.
So Tiberius had this steep, sheer cliffside at Villa Jovis, where he would test prospective astrologers. He would bring them up to the edge, asked them to predict the future.
Right.
And if he suspected they were frauds, or honestly, if he just felt they'd seen too deep into his own dark secrets and knew too much, he had a hulking freedman standing right there.
Just waiting for this signal.
You would just give a subtle nod, and the guard would hurl the astrologer off the cliff to be dashed on the rocks below.
A brutal filtering process. He was testing their accuracy by seeing if they could foresee their own doom.
So Thrasyllus is brought up to this cliff. The guard is standing there. Tiberius asks him to read the stars and provide some insights.
And Thrasyllus does so brilliantly.
But then Tiberius asks the trap question. And what about your own horoscope? What do the stars say for you today? And Thrasyllus supposedly looks at the charts, calculates the positions of the planets, goes completely pale, and says, "My lord, the stars tell me that my life is in imminent, immediate danger at this exact moment."
Which thoroughly impressed Tiberius. He survived the test because he accurately predicted the physical danger he was in, proving his skill and earning his place as the emperor's chief advisor.
Yeah.
Thrasyllus became the only man who could consistently calm Tiberius's worst fears.
It's an incredible story of quick thinking or, genuine astrological skill, depending on how you look at it.
Indeed.
But Thrasyllus wasn't the only famous figure summoned to the island. In AD 31, around the same time as the Sejanus crisis, Tiberius brings his young grandnephew to live with him, a kid nicknamed Caligula.
Yes. And this is where the history of Capri directly intersects with the future nightmare of Rome.
Right.
Capri served as the political breeding ground for one of Rome's most infamous future tyrants. Caligula was brought into what was essentially a golden cage.
And the psychological trauma this kid must have endured is just hard to fathom. Caligula is forced to live with Tiberius, swallow his pride, and constantly flatter the old man.
Under constant surveillance.
And he has to do this knowing full well that Tiberius and Sejanus had likely engineered the starvation and executions of his own mother and his older brothers back in Rome.
It was a masterclass in psychological survival and emotional suppression. Caligula had to actively smile, serve his granduncle at dinner, and pretend absolutely nothing was wrong.
That takes a toll.
The Roman historians explicitly note that Caligula never once complained or showed a single ounce of grief for his dead family members.
Not a single tear.
He had learned the lesson of the island. A single tear, a single frown of resentment would seal his fate. He would be off the cliff or handed to the executioner in a heartbeat.
He became a master actor.
Exactly, just mirroring Tiberius's moods perfectly.
But our sources say Tiberius wasn't actually fooled by the act. Tiberius saw right through this false humility.
He did.
He famously remarked that by keeping Caligula around, he was rearing a viper for the Roman people.
A very prophetic statement.
Okay, here is what I don't get. If Tiberius is so incredibly smart and he's so wildly paranoid that he executes people for bringing him a fish, and he knows Caligula's faking it, literally calling the kid a venomous snake, why on earth does he keep him alive?
That's a great question.
Why not just toss him off the cliff with the bad astrologers and be done with the threat?
This brings us right back to Thrasyllus and the astrology. You have to understand Tiberius's deep, profound fatalism.
Okay, how so?
Because he believed so completely in astrology, he believed that the future was already written in the stars. Thrasyllus had likely cast Caligula's horoscope and seen that he was destined to succeed Tiberius. If the stars said Caligula was destined to survive and become emperor, Tiberius felt he couldn't fight it. It was the will of the cosmos. He saw Caligula's destructive rise as a foregone conclusion.
So he just resigned himself to it.
Yes. But there's a deeper tragedy here regarding Caligula's upbringing. Imagine the formative years of a teenager spent in this specific environment. Capri was Caligula's masterclass in absolute, unchecked autocracy.
Right. He didn't learn how to govern a complex republic with compromises and laws and Senate votes.
No, not at all.
He learned that absolute power means you can throw people off cliffs when you are bored, you can physically destroy a man for bringing you a fish, and you can demand total sociopathic emotional suppression from your own family.
Exactly. The tyrant Caligula became the monster who would later torture senators and declare himself a living god, was forged entirely in the fires of Tiberius's paranoia on Capri.
So we have this picture painted by our sources, right? A dark, heavily militarized, hyper-anxious island dripping with tension, psychological warfare, and brutal executions.
That's the picture we've built, yes.
But that's not exactly how pop history remembers Tiberius on Capri, is it?
No, it's really not.
When most people today think of this era, they don't think of a sad old man doing paperwork and looking at star charts. They think of wild, depraved parties, unimaginable decadence, and total hedonism.
And this is where we have to confront the historiography, the history of the history, essentially. We have to look at the gap between myth and reality and how historical memory is heavily polarized by contemporary imperial biases.
Right. We are talking about the Julio-Claudian writers, specifically Tacitus and Suetonius, who are our main sources for all these crazy stories.
Exactly. These historians were writing decades later, and they championed the perspective of the aggrieved Senate. And remember, the Senate absolutely despised Tiberius.
I'd say left them.
He had abandoned them, stripped them of their relevance, and ruled them via terrifying letters from a rock. So when it came time to write the history books, they held the pen.
They got to tell the story.
They painted Capri not as a brilliant administrative bunker, but as a hotbed of extreme sexual perversion, sadism, and cruelty.
They're the ones who popularized the legend of the Salto di Tiberio, Tiberius's leap, that specific vertical cliff near Villa Jovis, where he supposedly hurled guests, disobedient slaves, and anyone who annoyed him into the sea, just for fun.
While sailors beat their bodies with oars in the water below, yes.
Did he actually do that?
Did he execute people? Certainly. The astrologer's cliff and the treason trials are well documented. But the scale of the debauchery and the arbitrary comic book sadism described by Suetonius, most modern historians deeply discount these extreme accounts as sensationalized political slander.
So the Roman historians were essentially writing the ancient equivalent of a tabloid hit piece.
Pretty much.
They were just disgruntled, humiliated senators who were furious that the emperor was successfully working from home, completely ignoring them and proving they were useless. So they made up stories about him being a monster to discredit his reign.
That is precisely what it was. Historical memory is entirely shaped by those who write the books. The reality, according to modern archaeological and historical consensus, is that Tiberius was notoriously austere.
Austere.
He was a conservative, rigid Roman general. He was reclusive. He wasn't hosting massive, depraved orgies. He was working on tax budgets, studying Greek grammar, and worrying about assassins.
So his retreat was an extreme manifestation of self-preservation, not hedonism.
Exactly.
And honestly, nothing symbolizes this gap between the ancient myth and the modern archaeological reality better than the Blue Grotto.
Oh, the Grotta Azzurra.
Yes. It is this world-famous sea cave on the coast of Capri. You take a tiny rowboat to get into it, and the light passes through an underwater cavity, illuminating the water so it literally glows this brilliant neon ethereal blue.
It's stunning, but to the Romans, it wasn't just a pretty natural wonder. Tiberius actually converted the Blue Grotto into his personal nymphaeum.
What's a nymphaeum?
It was a monumental, sacred space dedicated to water nymphs, often designed for religious reflection and sensory experience.
Okay, and the ancient legends and local folklore said he had adorned the underwater walls and the edges of this cave with magnificent marble statues of Neptune, Tritons, and other marine deities, right? Yes. But for centuries, historians and locals thought this was just another crazy myth invented by Suetonius. They thought, there's no way he built a temple underwater in a sea cave. That's just a ghost story.
Sounded too fanciful. Until 1964.
Yes. I love this part. In 1964, scuba divers go down to the sandy floor of the Blue Grotto to explore, and what do they find?
The statues.
They physically recover these heavily encrusted, authentic Roman marble statues from the seafloor. Statues of Neptune and Tritons, exactly as the legends described. They are now sitting in a museum in Capri.
It serves as the perfect metaphor for the entire Capri period.
It really does.
You have centuries of wild myths that the cave was magical, haunted, or just a setting for debauchery, and then modern archaeology steps in and validates the core truth of the space.
The statues were real.
The statues prove that the reality of what Tiberius built was indeed extraordinary, monumental, and deeply weird. But it was fundamentally different from the gossip. It was about controlling nature, building sacred, isolated spaces, and projecting divine power, not just mindless hedonism.
It is just incredible to see the physical proof of that history, literally pulled out of the water. To wrap up this deep dive, we've watched how an island paradise, a beautiful, jagged rock traded away by Augustus, was completely transformed.
Transformed into a fortress.
Right. Tiberius turned it into a militarized, technologically advanced administrative bunker driven entirely by fear. He built waterless baths on mountain peaks by mastering concrete and rain catchment.
He engineered an encrypted optical internet that could execute a man 150 miles away.
And he terrorized anyone who dared to breach his solitude, from brilliant astrologers to fishermen with a mullet.
He achieved something almost impossible in the ancient world. He successfully governed a massive, complex empire from total isolation for over 10 years.
It's an unbelievable logistical feat.
But if I can leave you with a final thought to mull over, we must consider the ultimate paradox of Emperor Tiberius.
What's the paradox?
Well, he achieved absolute, unquestioned power, and he used that power to build the perfect, impenetrable fortress to guarantee his physical safety.
Right.
But if total security requires total isolation, if it requires creating a manufactured, tightly controlled reality and living your final years in perpetual, exhausting fear of every single person around you, at what point does your perfect, beautiful fortress simply become a prison of your own making?
A prison where you are both the warden and the only inmate. That is a heavy, incredible thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us as we explore the rocky cliffs, the hidden cisterns, and the paranoid mind of Tiberius. Until next time, keep diving deep.